My name is Ilya Zlotnik, advisor and partner with Vivaldi Capital Management, and welcome to today's conversation on health and wellness with Daniel Chille. Daniel is the founder and owner of TBD Fitness, a local gym and online platform that helps its clients with their health and wellness journey. Daniel's also a longtime friend of mine, my personal trainer, and the person that I turn to for many of my questions and curiosities as it relates to health and longevity. And there's a lot of them. Welcome to today's conversation.
Thank you for having me.
It's good to have you here. Obviously, this is a topic that I love, but also I think there's really an interesting intersection between the work that you do, which is health, and the work that I do, which is wealth, in the sense that many of my conversations are tangential to longevity. I sit there with clients during our reviews and we talk about how long their wealth will last them. Decades until they're 95, 100, 105. People are obviously living longer these days. And we want to make sure that people can enjoy the fruits of their labor without having to worry about running out of money, but also to be able to pass on wealth to their kids, their grandkids, and to causes that are important to them. And, as I get older, and a lot of my clients are older than me, you really start to realize that you can have all the wealth in the world, but if you don't have health, you can't really enjoy that wealth. And the more health that you have, the more you can enjoy your wealth. And that's kind of where you come in. We've had a few clients of mine recently become clients of yours as I'm having more of these conversations with certain clients that are interested in the topic. One had a knee injury. You were able to fix that knee injury. Now you're focusing on strength training with them. And the other one has an illness caused by metabolic health issues, which you're working on with their eating, their diet, their fitness, and everything around that. So for today's conversation, I'd love to hear about your journey, what got you to where you're at today, the work that you do for your clients, and then also you have a very interesting program around testing for genetics and things like that, which I'm participating in. So we'll look at the results of my genetics and things that I should be careful of and things I can change to prevent any longevity and health risks in the future. So to start off with, what got you into kind of the space that you're in and the work that you do today?
Yeah, I'm definitely excited to have this conversation. So fitness and kind of everything optimizing health and wellness has always been a component of my lifestyle. So I grew up playing soccer, and at an early age, I was taught that when I'm sleeping, someone else is training. So it was always my drive to be the best in whatever aspect I was pursuing. At the time, it was soccer, and that was kind of my first truth, my one first love. But it also set a foundation for me to really optimize my health. I was always extremely fast, extremely fit, and extremely health conscious because I always wanted to play at the professional level. And so that's what I did. I went to school here, grew up in Chicago, went to school in Northwestern, played D1 here. Then I went to go play in Europe. And after my career was cut short due to, unfortunately, repeated hamstring tears, looking back, I always say I wish I know now what I wish I knew then what I know now, in the sense of strength training and structural balance, and that's what we've implemented at TBD Fitness and Holistic Health, the facility and wellness boutique that I opened up in Elk Grove Village, Illinois. When I first started, I started off as a personal trainer, and it was my goal to just kind of improve just overall health and wellness of all our clients. But for me, I always wanted to yearn more, and I always had this kind of innate passion for medicine. And so I opted to pursue medical school, where I pursued my doctorate both in naturopathic and chiropractic medicine. And so as I evolved, so too did our clinic. We began to see people for a lot more than just fitness-related goals or even nutrition. We treat patients of kind of all different backgrounds and illnesses who are all looking to naturally get healthier. Now, health to me is interesting because how we define health here, unfortunately, looking into the lens of blood work, for example, which is one component that we do, advanced and integrated blood testing. The norms here, they count for obesity, right? So what's normal and what's optimal are two very different discourses. And so my goal that I distill not only within myself, my family, but naturally with all of our patients and clients alike, is to pursue optimal. And while I think most people say wealth is defined by the freedom of time, or perhaps that's how I look at it, how I look at it now and how that's evolved is, to me, true wealth is defined by optimizing health. Because if you don't have your health, all else in life becomes trivial. So that's what we do. Is our holistic health center is we practice natural medicine, and our goal is to optimize the health and wellness of all our patients and clients. We have kids, and we work with adults. I think our oldest patient is in their late 80s. And so I love seeing the growth of people. I love seeing their transformations. And I just love helping people. It's been my mission to serve, and I don't take that for granted. I wake up every day realizing just how fully blessed I am that people entrust their health with me, their family's health with me. And I give back by obviously improving their outcomes. So it's been an incredible journey so far. I look forward to continue to learn and grow. There's areas of different kind of buckets that we're working on this year with our clinic. So we're going very deep within microbial medicine and optimizing gut health. To me, if you want to optimize overall health, the fastest way to do that is by evaluating the gut. And while our microbiome is constantly evolving, I think it's perhaps one of the most important things that needs to be looked at. And I think science is only scratching the surface of learning its the synergy between our microbiome and our own human cells. Second to that is cellular medicine. So we utilize peptides and other cellular therapies to prevent and reverse disease. And then the last kind of bucket that you spoke to was genetic testing. And that is super unique because that speaks to only you, naturally. And it's a one-time test, and then from there you can very much customize your entire lifestyle. So it's quite a profound approach that we utilize to achieve this kind of optimized state.
You mentioned gut health. It's been a buzzword, I feel like, for a year to two, and I'm looking forward to digging a bit more to learn more about it because it's still a bit over my head, but I know it's so important, so we can definitely talk about that. The other thing that stands out is anytime I go to your studio, you have this wall of before and after pics and the changes that people make in their lives, which is really cool. And so question, you have a new client, they come in, obviously you have people from all walks of life. How do you start? How do you assess them? What do you look at? How do you build a personal plan for each and every person that you work with?
So looking at it for a couple different lenses, at the onset, just when you ask that question, to me, it's about an experience too. So I've instructed all my staff is we want to greet people at the door. We want to greet people with a smile, with a handshake. It starts with building a level of trust, but also making sure people feel welcome and safe in our environment. Once we kind of establish that at the beginning, then we have most of our clients ahead of time fill out a intake that we have, which is a very comprehensive intake. It allows us to dive deep right from the get-go and understand what someone's goals are. I think that's really the most important place, is to define goals, what someone is looking to achieve. Now, what they want versus what we want out of them, that will transform as we continue on that path. And I think what people don't realize is the human potential is absolutely incredible, and we're only really scratching that surface, to be honest. And so once we demonstrate to our patients and clients that, listen, there's a lot more that you can achieve out of life, right? By improving not only the physical, but assessing and evaluating the mental or the cognitive, and utilizing a genetic test to enhance that. Or going back to gut health to then change your mental state as well, and also change your physical state, and then how each of these three kind of intertwine to optimize. Now, going back to the starting point is, so we'll start with a comprehensive intake, we'll assess goals, and then we have different metrics that we track and a full body analysis that we'll put a new patient through. And then from there, we'll able to build a customized program for them. So that usually integrates the physical. So we'll design a fitness plan for them that will definitely incorporate the nutrition component. And the analogy I like to use often is, if you have a car, exercise is your car and nutrition is your gas. So without the proper nutrition, you're not going anywhere. And then any other factors that need addressing. So often enough, you mentioned something earlier with one of the clients that we've been able to transform, and kind of metabolic disease and metabolic syndrome, and doing various testing to uncover certain things perhaps that are overlooked. And from there, we were able to dive deeper and then create this full holistic health program that accelerates results. Most people want results tomorrow. I want results yesterday. Okay, so I want someone to achieve their higher self yesterday. And so our goal, by combining these kind of different treatment modalities, we're able to kind of move the needle faster, increase compliance, increase adherence, and support people daily while keeping them accountable to make sure they're on track to succeed.
And then when you work with people, I sense that you have a range of people that are very committed. Other people, I mean, at the end of the day, everybody wants to be healthy, right? Now, what do you think is the biggest lever people can pull to stay committed to a plan for the long term?
Okay, so we have developed, I created this acronym called SPEND. And the question I always pose is, how do you spend your life? So spend has a meaning naturally. So the foundation is what's critical, okay? Often enough, people are looking for that shortcut solution, and there's a lot of different kind of fancy things within longevity. People are looking for, the eternal elixir and supplements that increase lifespan. For me, is if you don't master the basics, you're doing yourself a disservice, and that cannot be both overlooked or understated. So within our SPEND philosophy, that if you consider SPEND as a pyramid, the foundation is S. S stands for sleep, stress, sunlight, and for our adults, sex. So that obviously impacts hormones, which is also necessary.
One of the pros with sunlight is in Chicago during the winter, you get none.
So where there is none, we can supplement with vitamin D. Extremely cost effective. Vitamin D supplements are not expensive, and they can very much move the needle, and it's critical to almost every cell function of the body, definitely for weight loss, more importantly fat loss, bone formation, so on and so forth. So sleep, I think, is the biggest one that's often overlooked, and we live lives where we almost burn the candle at both ends. So we're overstressed, we're under-recovered, we're overworked, and we're nutrient deprived. And it's kind of rife for this metabolic disease state that is becoming ubiquitous, especially here in the US. My question becomes, can you optimize for sleep? Meaning, can you design a life where actually sleep becomes the priority? And that's what's, I think, really difficult, because most of us value our careers, and especially relative to your clients, we are working hard so that naturally we can earn more, but then it becomes at the consequence of our health. And so if sleep isn't optimized, everything upstream is broken. And I have one client who came to me, 10 years, he didn't have one restful night of sleep. Can you imagine that? 10 years, not one restful night of sleep.
Sounds like complete torture.
Needless to say, he gained probably close to 200 pounds. He did sleep studies, sleep apnea. He's seen multiple doctors. He comes to me, and he comes to me with back pain, because I still see people for rehabilitation. And I said, well, is this something you'd like to improve? And he goes, yeah, but I don't think there's much I can do. I kind of tried everything in the book, seen all these doctors. No one's been able to help. I said, well, let's do kind of a couple different tests and, see what we can uncover. I'm fairly confident that I can reverse that in probably as little as 3 to 4 weeks. So he kind of chuckled and laughed. And so put him in through a series of tests and put him on a couple different supplements that I thought would benefit. Within 2 weeks, he had one night of sleep that he did not wake up once the entire night. He came to me the next day. I'll never forget. I almost get like chill saying this. He's like, Daniel, this is a miracle. This hasn't happened in 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And he almost had a tear. Like it was that moving for him because this was just so severely affecting his life. And so if you provide the body what it needs, it wants to heal. The problem is that we get in the way, okay? And sleep is the crux of that. And sleep is a big topic. Matthew Walker has kind of brought a lot of light to that with his book, and people understand the importance of optimizing for sleep. And whenever I do have an intake, you asked about that, I always ask people, what do you think the shortcut to fat loss is? Weight loss to me is easy, but fat loss, that's where it becomes interesting, how you can accelerate that. And so I ask, what's the fastest way to lose fat? And people have all these answers, and not once has anyone ever expressed sleep. And that's when our hormones heal and repair. And so the fastest way is optimizing for sleep. Next is stress. So to me, stress turns on all inflammatory pathways in the body. Stress is the elephant in the room. And I didn't realize this myself until I had 3 kids and opened up my own practice after med school. And so before it didn't really hit home, and now it hits hard. And I recognize that you have to be able to compartmentalize things and use different tactics for buffering stress, whether that's time in nature, whether that's doing mindful activities, whether that's spending more time with your loved ones and prioritizing your relationships, whether that is walking in nature or going to a comedy show, just
Turning off the phone.
yeah, that's stress too. Blue light exposure stress, we can get into that later on. But needless to say is stress is sabotaging our health. And that's a component of when I say overstressed, we become cortisol resistant. And cortisol is a bully hormone. And what people don't realize is hormones act as a family. They don't act in unison. So people think, okay, if you're insulin resistant, then that's it. But no, that's not true. That'll impact other hormones that impact your thyroid, which impacts your metabolism, which then prevents you from optimizing fat loss. So my question is, okay, the body's not just one organ. Let's optimize and synchronize all the organs. But we have to really kind of alleviate the constant bombardment of stress, okay? Next is sunlight. So you alluded to that in Chicago. We are deprived of sun most of the year.
Half the year.
Yeah, I say most of the year because it seems that way. But taking something as simple as a vitamin D supplement is highly effective. But what's interesting looking at a genetic report, if you have the VDR SNP, some people have less receptors, and you need more vitamin D to enhance absorption. Or some people have downgraded receptor activity, so you're not able to synthesize as much from the sun, which then just reinforces that you need a little bit more vitamin D as well. So now understanding your gene report can actually enhance your optimized wellness plan, because we can account for certain deficiencies given your genetic SNPs. The last one is sex. For our adult audience is the release of serotonin and oxytocin.
I think everybody's an adult that's listening to this.
And these love chemicals are said. Well, it's because when you said an intake, so we have a athlete training program and some of our younger athletes, and so this is not a component I dive in with parents, but I do dive into relationships, because I think so much of a quality of our life is also driven by relationships, because you can optimize for sleep, you can optimize for sunlight, you can optimize for stress, meaning you're exercising right, you're meditating right, you're walking right, talking right, moving right, pooping right. But if life is miserable at home, or life is miserable with your children, or you feel disconnected, or you have poor friendships, that's stress.
Mm-hmm.
And so emotional health and mental health are probably two of the biggest buckets that are often overlooked within any sort of medical practice. But it very much all ties into one. And that's why the body is not one organ. You kind of have to look at it from a larger microscope rather than something so granular. We're just compartmentalizing the body into pieces. So we start with that spend philosophy. That's kind of the foundation. I can dive upstream if you like, or to answer your question, that's how we start.
Yeah. In my line of business, spend is how much are you spending? But I like your acronym. Yeah, it's what's interesting. First of all, I think the world that we live in now and the technology that's out there makes all this so interesting because you could really understand your unique DNA, your genetics, your body, and really customize the plan for yourself. And as you mentioned, there's just so many buckets to consider, and they're all intertwined. Like for me, the mental aspect or being mentally healthy has been a big priority to me because there's a lot. There's a business, there's kids, so making that a priority along with sleep has been a big part of my journey and the work that we've done. Just, I mentioned earlier the microbiome aspect of health and how it's been talked a lot about. It's still somewhat of a mystery to me. Maybe we can spend a few minutes talking about that, why that's so important and what people can do.
Yeah. I do want to also touch upon when you made a comment about spending on your health, because too often, and especially people within your line of work, it almost seems like the wealthier you become, the less you spend on your health somehow. Mm-hmm. And I think people have to reframe their paradigm in the sense of, I understand we have bills, right? Health insurance, life insurance, we have gas, we have home insurance, mortgage, et cetera, et cetera. So people are looking to lean out in certain buckets where they can kind of save. But unfortunately, I see too often people choose the bucket of health. And that becomes a problem because people who are metabolically ill or sick,
they choose to leave out the bucket of health. That's not where they're spending. Okay.
The problem becomes is we have to reframe our paradigm of how I look at it is like, let's say I have a budget of X, right? So this is what I allocate towards certain buckets, but for my health, I'm not price sensitive to my health. So my bucket for my health is almost limitless because if all other things are great, but again, your health is crippled, nothing else matters at the end of the day. So I think it's important for people to start realizing is perhaps they should think about spending more on their health rather than their car, or spend more on their health rather than their mortgage.
Or maybe another way to look at it is it's not really an expense, it's an investment. It truly is an investment because the greater your health, the more energy you have, the more you can enjoy life. So it's not even an expense, it's truly an investment.
Yes, but too often people see it as, okay, can I kind of spend less? Where can I save? Like, should I? And I understand the lens because I have a clinic, so this speaks to me. But the reality is I see people getting more and more sick. And what's changing, right? In the US, unfortunately, we rank very low in preventative medicine. We practice sick medicine, right? So someone is sick, you go and see a doctor rather than spending the time on finding someone to customize the fitness plan for you or a nutrition plan for you. Or if you need a lawyer, you don't start reading the law book yourself to create a document, you go to a lawyer. If you need someone to do an accounting, yeah, there may be some platforms where you can do it yourself, but the only time that I failed was when I tried to do it myself. So now I pay an accountant. So it's prudent to, I think, find a specialist in your area or work with someone, whether it's us or other, wellness specialists that really take stock in diving deep and understand the kind of full scope of optimizing longevity. So you inquired about the microbiome, and so I term it as microbial medicine, colloquially known as kind of gut health. So one of the tests that I perform within what I termed as our kind of optimal longevity panel is a stool test. Now, some controversy around that because your microbiome is always evolving. It's changing. It's never the same. So your microbiome today is going to be very different than tomorrow. And what's interesting is stress adversely affects that on a very large scale. So looking at kind of this marketing word of leaky gut or intestinal permeability, looking at kind of when you're sick, looking at SIBO, which is estimated now 1 in 2 people are asymptomatic SIBO.
What is that?
So SIBO is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. All of your microbiome should reside primarily in your large intestine. What happens is sometimes things can come up north, and then now you have this overgrowth in your small intestine, which wreaks havoc on the epithelial lining of your gut, which is 1 cell thick. So what's interesting is 38 trillion bacteria and then your own gut human cells, okay, there is one cell thick between that layer. So imagine a fence that has one lick between 38 trillion bacteria. And so that is very easily compromised when there's infection, when there is a lot of foods that we're eating that are being chemically processed, or residues of pesticide, herbicide, etc. When we're taking a lot of these antibiotics or NSAIDs for just pain, everything has a consequence. And if you want to optimize overall health, you have to optimize the gut. Okay? So we run this stool test, and from there we can see, okay, is there any sort of pathogenic activity that we need to be concerned about? Any sort of fungal overgrowth that leads to excess candida and that can impact small intestinal bacterial overgrowth? Is there any sort of overgrowth of amoeba, protozoa, archaea, bacteria, virus? So it's very, very thorough, but then it allows us to create a more actionable, targeted solution plan. And interestingly, in nearly 15 years of practice, I haven't found anyone that didn't benefit from a simple stool test. Because from there, we can really optimize everything upstream, because so much of what happens starts in the gut. Your immunity, serotonin production, neurotransmitter production, which affects mental health and cognition. So we start with the gut, do a simple stool test, and then from there we can discern kind of a lot of things that are happening upstream. It's often overlooked because people don't necessarily always have symptoms. And that's the thing is, I have always said our bodies can function around 60% before there's one straw that breaks the camel's back, and then people wondering, oh man, what just happened? Well, it's because you were 40% deficient for a long time. And then now there was one thing that kind of triggered that and set off the cascade of inflammation or disease, if you will. And that's inflammation that's running rampant. So looking at microbial medicine, super interesting area of study and research for me. Always something new, always something to learn and grow there. But one that we take as a core pillar of what we do when we create a customized wellness program.
Wow, that's so fascinating. You never really think about this, but there's so much science going kind of underneath the hood or underneath the stomach, so to speak, and how it could really impact you. So looking forward to diving in. I still haven't taken the stool test, so I got to do that. And it's been in my car for a while. I have no excuses. So as it relates to, okay, so you got that. One question I have, this is, to me, I can never really wrap my mind around what's the best direction. But recently Netflix had this special where they followed identical twins, and they wanted to see the impact of diet, specifically an omnivore diet, a healthy omnivore diet, and a purely vegan diet had on identical twins. And they're the easiest people to test because they effectively have the same exact DNA. And their results were that the vegan diet was optimal because it had all these great benefits, lowering cholesterol and all these other things that were beneficial. But then on the other end, I guess you can get enough protein from a vegan diet, but protein is such a big thing as well as making sure you maintain muscle mass, all that. What's your thoughts on the omnivore versus vegan diet?
So let's take a step back here, because I don't want to say there's incentives behind everything, but there truly is. Mm-hmm. So looking at kind of the vegan nutrition plan and optimizing, I think you mentioned for cholesterol or cardiovascular risk factors, what if we do a advanced blood test and we realize maybe those norms are wrong and maybe lower cholesterol associated with lower IQ, right? Who are defining these norms? And in fact, what is optimal? Because we look at different parameters to assess optimal. And I think looking at cholesterol directly, that has been a big misnomer within the medical community for a long time. Just how we evaluate cholesterol with the overly simplistic model. There's good and bad cholesterol. To me, there's no such thing, right? There's lipoproteins that carry these particles, and to me, they're very much healing molecules, if anything. And cholesterol itself is the precursor to synthesize all hormones. How can that be bad, right? So it's not a question of bad or good. It's an issue. There's oxidation, there's particle size, looking at Lp(a) as a risk factor for cardiovascular disease, devoid of any other marker. So we go deep with that, but I think first we have to redefine what's optimal, and then provide context with information that's constantly evolving, but understanding is what are the incentives behind certain information, because you'll have people who claim to be specialists in their field perhaps, but we need to evaluate who they are and kind of what's feeding that. Now, what's interesting is I myself tried to go vegan for a little bit. So I like to kind of practice what I preach. I'm always doing N of 1. So anecdotally with myself, I saw a lot of markers optimized, but long term, there was a lot of mistakes being made that I learned early on, way back when in my career, that if you don't supplement for certain factors, you're going to be deficient. Vegans, vegetarians notably, are deficient often enough in choline and creatine and B12 and a few other markers that if you're not supplementing, you're doing yourself a disservice, because it's very hard to get everything from food. And what I find, the most nutrient-dense food, in fact, are going to be organ meats or eggs. Yet we are kind of excluding this from our diet, even within our omnivore diet. Why? Because perhaps it's taste, perhaps it's accessibility, perhaps it's not being marketed well, right? It's not coming to light. Soon enough, we will see this kind of nose to tail nutrition is critical. Second to that, going back to the microbiome, short chain fatty acids. That's kind of the postbiotic. That's what our bacteria produce. That's derived from fiber. Okay, so eating a very nutrient-dense, fibrous nutrition plan is key. And I don't like the word diet because it has the word diet in it. I don't like too often, I guess, how you speak to a client about that matters, because to me, diet means something that's sacrificing in nature. And I don't like that. I want nutrition to be nourishing. And when I think of food, I think it's either nurturing us or not. It's either helping us or it's hurting us. I don't see nutrition as a net neutral. Okay. So anytime I eat, I'm thinking, okay, is this meal going to be something that is nurturing me, or is it going to be setting me back? Is it going to increase my energy levels or kind of deprive me? That's first and foremost. So I try to abstain from fried foods, highly inflammatory nature. And when we have a food like that, it can set an inflammatory cascade for up to 21 days, research finds. So what's interesting, people don't realize, is the meal that we're eating today has negative or positive effects way days later ahead in the future. What diet is best? Again, I don't like the word diet, so what nutrition plan is best? There's no one-size-fits-all philosophy, and utilizing twins is kind of like the holy grail in medical clinical research, because you can kind of account for many different confounding variables except the microbiome. Because what's interesting is while twins are almost identical, their microbiome is probably somewhere in the range of 25 to maybe maximum 35% similar. You're actually more similar to your spouse than your twin. How is that happening? That's because of the foods we eat. So the kale that we're eating is either feeding a certain kind of healthy bacteria, or the sugar that we're feeding can provide this kind of fungal overgrowth, candida overgrowth, which I know we have some things that I've discussed with you in the past, not necessarily on a personal level, but how that kind of affects us overall. So the food we feed is a feast for the microbiome that we want to nurture and grow. And so by doing a simple stool test, I can evaluate what's going on there, and then allowing us to focus on certain nutrition plans that will enhance that. I don't know that there is an optimal nutrition plan for everyone, again, because I think that if you live closer to the equator, for example, you're going to do better with carbohydrates. I'm a proponent of eating the seasons. So what is in season? It's interesting because amylase, which is the enzyme that breaks down carbohydrate production, is upregulated in the times of fall. Why? That's when we harvest wheat. Isn't that interesting? Our body has this innate sense of what we need to break down, but because we live in this global society, we're eating avocados and guacamole every day. Okay? Not to say that that's unhealthy.
I love a good guacamole.
Not to say that that's unhealthy, but I'm a proponent of eating in the seasons. And then also understanding that sunlight, sun exposure is also going to affect that, and where you are in terms of the equator and kind of your carbohydrate consumption, how well you do processing carbs, because carbohydrates are not vital to life. Okay? Cellular structure is made up of two components: fat, a phospholipid membrane, and protein, which is the scaffolding. So those two are critical. Now, going back to the fiber component, that in conjunction with probably nitric oxide is the two most anti-inflammatory components that our body requires. Fiber, I always suggest, is eat 30 unique plant or legume or nuts, seed, vegetable components, and fruit in moderation dailies, but targeting kind of the notion of 30 different fibrous components during the course of a week, let's say. So not daily, but 30 kind of unique vegetables, if you will, nuts, seeds, fruit, legumes, tremendously beneficial. So there, as you can see, none of that was meat derived, right? So a lot of people say, okay, what do you think about carnivore? What do you think about ketogenic? What I think is, no matter what I suggest, I think we should always cycle, just like there's cycle in the seasons, okay? Nothing grows all year round. Okay? As the season cycles, so does our bodies, okay? And our bodies are constantly turning over red blood cells, all different cells, to optimize our own health. So our body has this innate ability to heal. We just get in the way because we're ingesting these foods that aren't native to our biology, and that's processed foods. Taking that aside, assuming that we understand, okay, we want to eat foods with no labels, that the ingredient is the food. Again, what's best is different for everyone, but looking at kind of a, balanced, quote unquote, approach, I think that as long as you are getting in a certain level of all your micronutrients, which again is difficult, so supplementing is prudent where there are deficiencies. But a balanced nutrition to me is kind of very Paleolithic, omnivorous. But in general, again, looking at the Mediterranean diet that was touted as kind of most supreme, for example, I think Mediterranean diet is great for those that live in that climate. I don't know that that's best for someone that lives in the Nordic countries or Australia, for example. So again, eat locally. Ideally, kind of this notion of farm to table. If you can have your own garden, better still, you control the source. But what you put in your mouth is instruction, just like our hormones are instruction. And so that is the most powerful signaling molecule that we can control.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just kind of as transition from that, a lot of it is customized. Each person is unique. Understanding how you're unique and what you should be eating is going to be different for you, for me, for other people throughout the world. So maybe we transition to the genetics test I took, is that is ultimately unique to me. And I'm curious to hear what the results are and what we got.
Okay. So looking at genetics testing, we're still, while we have uncoded kind of the human genome, we are very far from understanding the interplay between all the genes and kind of what everything still does. So the genetic test that we do looks at over 130 different genes and kind of their unique pathways, and also the interplay of how things are all connected. And this speaks to predispositions. So you can now optimize your lifestyle with realizing certain risk factors that are relative to you. So you can supplement for deficiencies, and you can now kind of create this optimized plan because you understand that you are better in certain buckets, and while there are deficiencies in the other, they don't come to play unless certain things get turned on. So our genes are almost like these light switches that turn on and off depending on our environment, which is this notion of epigenetics. So our environment probably matters exponentially more than kind of our genetics. And what's interesting is that your genetics you're doing an exceptional job given your genetics, because there's a lot of risk factors that you have that I would have never guessed, because you have really dialed in everything, right? You're keeping yourself active daily. We've developed kind of this strength training program for you. You probably look and feel your best. I know I've known you for some time now, and I can unequivocally say I remember when we did a recovery session the other day. I was like, "Wow, Ilya, you are looking good, young man." So
Appreciate that.
no. Kudos to you. Is you're prioritizing your health and you're reaping the reward. And this is why this discussion is so important, because while this is the intersection of health and wealth, to me, wealth is health.
Absolutely.
So looking at your genetic report, I have a printout here for you. So this is a printout that we provide for all of our patients who go through this test here. It's a 30-page report that kind of decodes all the unique SNPs relevant to you, and it categorizes them into kind of different levels of risk. All right, so you're going to see as we open this up here that there are certain pathways that are kind of more prone to potential issues if you don't
I'm a bit
account for them.
excited and nervous to see what I got here.
Okay, so the first pathway for you is mood and behavior.
Okay.
Now, I'm glad to dive into certain SNPs. If you want, we can do a very kind of
We can do
thorough
high
take.
level. Yeah.
But I think why this is so beautiful is because when you look at this, it becomes very actionable, right? So you have the high risk mood and behavior pathway. So it indicates here consuming certain foods that are going to help mitigate those risk factors. It provides certain exercise guidelines that'll help mitigate those risk factors. It helps with providing specific vitamins and their dosing to help mitigate all those risk factors. So do you see how this becomes a lot more actionable? So if someone is looking to take their health and wellness to the next level, to me, this becomes the foundation, because this is a test that you run only one time, but you can build on it for the rest of your life. So we'll see here that your MTHFR gene, which is quite a hot topic of how you methylate or how you take kind of inactive nutrients and kind of break it down into its active form. But it's also relevant to kind of every chemical process in the body. And so if people don't methylate well, you're doing yourself a disservice if you're not going to count for certain supplements, or at least within your food that you're getting these micronutrients. So mood and behavior is a huge impact for you. And I know that within your personal life, we've been kind of working on certain things and to enhance your mental well-being. And you expressed to me the other day that you're probably feeling and looking your best in probably the longest time. And so we've been able to dive deep and now even one step deeper to account for certain genetic SNPs that will help offset any sort of predisposition or risk factors that you have. Second is cholesterol. So you are prone to high cholesterol, interestingly.
Did not know that.
But looking at your blood work, your cholesterol looks beautiful. Why? Because you are taking all the correct measures to optimize your nutrition. Generally speaking, I think no one is 100% perfect, unfortunately. But that's important. Like I said, nutrition is what we control. And so cholesterol is very relevant to what we eat. It's also relevant, though, to many other different factors, which we dive deeper when we onboard our patients. But again, looking at yield cholesterol and accounting for certain different supplements would be prudent, as well as the food that you're consuming. And so if you look here, you'll see a lot of it is eating these animal-based, very nutrient-rich foods. Healthy fats, reducing saturated fat. Not all saturated fat is bad, but understanding kind of the risks therein. Then the last one is your highest impact pathway is histamine overload, okay? And so histamine is a chemical produced by your mast cells that really kind of speaks to me on an immune level. And so it's typically foods that you're consuming that the body then kind of produces this substrate. And so you need to be very conscious about certain histamine-producing foods because this will upregulate inflammation. This will drive
For me,
inflammation.
is there an example of food that I should be staying away from?
So it's not always staying away from, right? Remember, because I said because these are predispositions, that doesn't mean that you can't mitigate that risk factor. So for example, exercise, right? Exercise is stress to the body. But if you do it at a high level without recovering properly, that's just increased oxidative stress. That drives cortisol, that can drive inflammation, right? Similar with this, it's the dose the dose matters, okay? So alcohol is a notorious histamine driving food, white wine, red wine as well, for example. So being conscious with alcohol consumption. Fermented foods, touted as very beneficial, for you can be problematic. You don't know this until you do this test. You can maybe be intuitive and learn these things about you over time, okay? But certain foods that can drive histamine can be a problem for you. So within this, that dives into a deeper level of certain foods that you want to avoid. And then if you do kind of feel a little bit off, to buffer that with certain nutrients like zinc and quercetin and vitamin C. Now, vitamin C is interesting because although that's not your top 3, that's probably your top 4, okay?
Okay.
And you have a much higher need for vitamin C. You recycle vitamin C very poorly, but best for you is nutrition instead of
Supplements.
exogenous vitamin C.
Okay.
Yeah. So think about citrus foods. For me, for example,
Orange juice.
I don't like orange
Yeah,
juice.
yeah, I know.
No, but that's interesting. Okay.
Oranges.
So working with one of a client, a mutual kind of client of ours here, and he's kind of always picking my mind. And the other day he inquired about orange juice, and I was like, orange juice to me is you're just mainlining sugar. And if you're metabolically healthy, you can partition that much better for fuel rather than fat storage because that's signaling insulin, which is anti-anabolic, can be. And so, unfortunately, you store fat for fuel rather than burn fat for fuel. And so orange juice really can spike insulin, which you have to be conscious of because it's devoid of fiber. So people that go on these juice cleanses could be beneficial if you're not eating garbage anymore, processed food. I equate those.
And if you exercise all the time.
Well, on a healthy program. But understanding that the fiber is probably the most important component there. So yes, citrus fruits, I like lime, I like lemons, and something like a bell pepper. I try to consume bell peppers often in season because one has just about the adequate intake you need daily for vitamin C. So understanding now certain things that you have to account for, which is going to just set you up for long-term success.
Well, I'm looking to dig into it a bit more. I guess I get to keep that, right?
This is yours to take home study. We're going to do a thorough deep dive with you as well, other than this kind of high level. Typically with my clients, that's anywhere for 1 to 2 hours, depending how deep they want to dive into this. In several hours, it could be thereafter.
Well, we're going to grab lunch afterwards, a healthy lunch, I assume, and we can dive into this. I'm going to get some lime and lemon.
There you go.
In my water, at the very least.
Yeah, there you go.
This has been great. So I learned a lot today. Obviously, there's so much more to learn. And, it's been great working with you, obviously. And I appreciate you joining.
Yeah, thank you for having me. If any of your clients or people that you work with are eager to learn more, you can find myself and my team of wellness specialists at TBD Fitness and Holistic Health. We do both in person and online, and we love fostering new relationships and really helping people unleash their human potential.